You are welcome to Household of Faith Ministry, City of Truth. Amen. We thank the Lord Almighty. Last week, there wasn't really much of preaching, but one of the things I just talked about was just to admonish us and to say that we should stand in the gap for one another. Because there are things that your brother or your sister sitting next to you may be going through that you don't understand. But it doesn't matter whether you understand what they're going through or not. Your assignment is to stand in the gap for your brother and your sister until they overcome whatever the enemy is doing in the life of your brother and your sister. Amen. We looked at the fact that we looked at the four friends that had to carry their friend through the roof to meet with Jesus for the paralytic man, and we looked at the fact that it was because of the support that he found in his friend that he was able to get to Jesus. If he was to go by himself, he can't carry himself, but his four friends were determined that they will help him to find healing, and they carried him to the Lord. Amen. So stand in the gap for your brother. Stand in the gap for your sister. Amen. So today I wanted to just talk a bit about service. I want to talk about service. I want to talk about your service. I want to talk about my service. I want to talk about how we all come to the Father, because whatever we are doing right now, we are serving, isn't it? So if we are serving, what do we really mean by service? I sometimes go to the dictionary to find out what the definition of service could mean. And when I went to the dictionary defines service as the action of helping or doing work for someone. That is something like voluntary service. It could be, that is your service. An act of assistance, good turn, favor, kindness, helping hand. And service for me, therefore, is when I would say simply put, is an action that a person does for someone else. These are tangible objects that satisfy a need. It's just providing a need, providing a service that satisfies a need. I'm sure we all know when we talk about services, we all know transport services, every service, NHS services, all the services that we benefit from, that we tend to get from everywhere. We all understand what that means. When these organizations, they provide a service, we tend to judge them and say whether they are providing a good service or a bad service. And sometimes we say that these services they are providing is not a good one. We could go to a restaurant and we're served, and if we, after eating the food, we could say this service was not a good one, and we could complain about it. We could write, sometimes we even make our review on the website and talk about how we are not happy about the services that they provide. You see, in the house of God, we provide a service, and the Lord is our customer. Sometimes we tend to forget that when we sit here, we are here to please one person and one person alone, and that is the King of Kings. He's the one we provide the service for. When we come to serve him, we want to make sure that we are pleasing him at all times and not man. When we move from pleasing God to please man, we've lost the plot. And we have to understand what service is anyway in the first place. Once we know what it means, what the service that we provide is, then we will be able to do all that the Father has called us to do. Remember, like I said, the act of doing work for someone. It could be voluntary or it could be paid, but the main thing is that it meant satisfying a need. The Father needs us. to worship him. That's all he requires. He doesn't even need our money anyway. There's nothing we have that he asks of us, because we don't. Who is man that he is mindful of anyway? There is nothing that we say we have that the Father didn't give us. And a lot of times, in the process of time, we forget who we are and whose we are. Sometimes we go about, forgetting our purpose, that the real reason is for us to serve God. That's all. There's really nothing else. Every other thing is just a byproduct as you serve the Father. That is what it is. It is therefore important that we ensure that the Father is satisfied with the service that we provide. So it is important also that daily we review the service that we provide our Father. Whether it is a good service or not. Because the Father is constantly weighing the services that we provide. Whether it matches up with what he expects of us. We work for the King of Kings. And once our salvation, after our salvation, the next thing is always our service. I was reading the story of the parable of the Good Samaritan. I was reading that story, and I saw a different dimension to that story. Whenever we read the story, we all read different meanings to it. So if we can look at Luke chapter 10. Let's look at from 25 to 37. Luke 10. Let's read 1 to 2 first before we go to let's read 1 to 2 first. Luke 10, 1 to 2, and then we go to 25 to 37. The Bible says in Luke 10, 1, it says, after this the Lord appointed 70 others also, and sent them 2 by 2 before his face into every city and place where he himself was about to go.
Then he said to them, the harvest truly is great, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest.
What was the Father asking? He was talking about service. Those who are needed for the service, to serve in the vineyard, to go out and do all that the Father wants us to do. And he looked and he said, truly, the harvest truly is great. He said, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. Our service. After salvation, the next thing that always comes is our service. You cannot have salvation without having a service. The moment you accept Jesus as Lord and Savior, that becomes like your offer letter, and you step into the workplace, and the workplace is your service. And however you serve is also important as much as the way you have given your life. Your service is also very visible to the Father, and he sees. When we are serving, when we come to serve the Father, what it requires is that we give it all. That's all. I don't think sometimes is it too much for the Father to ask? Because he just wants us to give it all. He doesn't want us to do the haphazard kind of service, but he wants us to serve him with a cheerful heart And that is why when it comes to giving, because that is also part of our service, whatever we do, whether it be praise, whether it be worship, whether it be tidying up the church, whether it be praying for the church, whatever it is, being in the choir, being in the instrument section, every aspect of our service is a service. And when we do it, we also remember that we are doing it unto the Lord and not unto any man. The moment we do things on a face value because we just want to do, we have missed the blessing that is attached to the service. And we have to understand who we serve. That is never interested in the physical that we portray, but he's always interested in what we present. And when we look at service, we are constantly looking at what is our motive in serving. And when we are truly serving, we are just available. And that's all it is. What that means daily is to cultivate a habit of each day, here am I, send me. And that means we have no agenda of our own, but rather we are moved according to the plan and purpose of the Father as he calls us and as he tells us, and whatever he says we do is what we are meant to do. And one of the things I found out is that service is never convenient. I've seen that. It's never convenient. If I am serving and it's very convenient for me, it is not really a service. I'm just doing what I love to do, just do it anyway. But the moment I move away from the comfort zone and begin to do things outside of how I really feel like, but because it pleases the Father, I do it anyway, that is service. And you know what the Father calls it? He calls it, he said, that is the reasonable service. The one that is acceptable to him. The one that crucifies you. That's the kind of service the Father is asking you and I to give. The kind of service that breaks you and brings you to be humble enough to just serve him and serve him alone. And that is why he talks about it. I think it's Romans 12:1 when he was talking about the Father. It's the kind of reasonable service that is acceptable. The living that we become. It says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. So you become the living sacrifice. What that means for me is that I am dead to myself. But then I am living as a sacrifice to him, without my own will, without my own agenda, without my own plan, without my own purpose, without my own pre-programs that I'm bringing to him. But I'm just standing in his presence and saying, here am I, send me. I have no plan of my own. And that service means I am constantly taken out of my zone, my comfort zone, the things that make me happy, the things that, it's like on Friday we had a night vigil. And after we finished, on Saturday morning the women had a meeting at 10 o'clock. I don't think anybody, if you know me before, I love sleep. I love my sleep a lot. I love to sleep on Saturday. Nothing gets me up. Even when my kids were young, I'll tell you, just go back to bed. Because I want to sleep. I'll send them back to bed. I'll make sure that when you're disturbing me for breakfast, go find something. I'm not going to get up because I love my Saturday morning sleep. I love it. Everybody knows, even growing up, they know. Even my husband knows I love my Saturday sleep. But when it comes to an assignment, that sleep has to disappear at some point. Because the Father requires me to serve. So whether it is convenient for me or it's not convenient for me, I just need to present myself as a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto Him, which is the only service that is reasonable to Him. Every other service that I try to provide, if it's not reasonable, then it's not acceptable. So each day when I'm serving, I'm constantly looking, is this my service? Is it acceptable unto Him? Am I just doing it for the sake of it? When I was looking at the story, like I said in Luke chapter 10 from 25, I was looking at the story of the parable of the Good Samaritan.
And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tested him, saying, Teacher, what should I do to inherit eternal life? He said to him, What is written in the law? What is your reading of it? So he answered and said, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, You have answered rightly, do this and you will live. But he, wanting to justify himself, said to Jesus, And who is my neighbor? Then Jesus answered and said, A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, who stripped him of his clothing, wounded him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a certain priest came down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by the other side. Likewise a Levite, when he arrived at the place, came and looked and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. So he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on him oil and wine. And he set him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. On the next day, when he departed, he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said to him, Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I come again, I will repay you. So which of these 3 do you think was neighbor to him, who fell among the thieves? And he said, He who showed mercy on him. Then Jesus said to him, Go and do likewise.
Amen. When I read the story, normally I just read about the Samaritan and how the thieves and all that, he's a good neighbor and things like that. But this time around, the Lord was teaching me something different in this passage. And I had to look at the priest, I had to look at the Levite, and I had to look at the Good Samaritan. And when I was looking at the Good Samaritan, the Lord was ministering to me and making me understand that each of these 3 people, they had an agenda for the day. When they all woke up from wherever they woke up from, they all had an agenda for the day. They all had programs, they all had things they had pre-planned. And they said they were going there. And it was on that journey, as the priest was going, including the Levite, each one of them, they met with this man that was beaten on the road. But each one of them, there was something I was thinking about that must have been on their mind. If I stop, it's going to disrupt my own agenda. And that means I will waste my time. I already have somewhere going. I already have something planned for the day. I'm not going to spend the whole time doing this. Well, somebody else may take care of him. And he will go about his priestly agenda. Because he's a priest, so he's a righteous man. He's serving God. So he's going maybe to serve in a certain way. And he's not bothered about that. That is not his agenda, because it does not affect him directly. So he goes. And so also is the Levite. The Levite comes around and sees this man. And each one of them, all they were thinking about is, if I will stop and do this or do that, that is going to disrupt my agenda for the day, my plan for the day. And when the Good Samaritan came, what the Lord was teaching me was the plan changed. It was no longer it was now a case of if this man is left here, what is going to happen to him? So what that means for me is totally the Good Samaritan's agenda changed because he was on assignment and the Father's big business became a priority to him from the moment he arrived there. If he had focused on where he was going, he would also do the same thing that the priest and the Levite did and just kind of let it go. I don't think that the priest is serving a bad cause. Neither do I think that the Levite was serving a bad cause. Each one of them was serving a good cause. But at the end of the day, when the story is being said, nothing is said about what the priest did eventually. And nothing is said about what the Levite did after that. But the story we hear daily is about what the Good Samaritan did and how he put his agenda for the day aside to serve the Father's agenda, because that became a priority for him. And the moment the Father's agenda is your priority, and the moment the Father's assignment becomes the one that is in your forefront, there is certainly greatness for you. The reason we talk about this story and we talk about the Good Samaritan is because the focus was not on self. It was on God's plan and God's agenda. In order to serve effectively, when we talk about service, it is that you put on the servanthood mentality. And a servant really has no plan of their own. Their only plan is to serve their master. But any servant who is constantly having an opinion in front of their master is not prepared to serve. Always, the Lord says, go here. Say, Lord, I have no time. I already have this that is already pre-planned. Can we not do that tomorrow? When the Father says, I am calling, the only one we should say is, here am I, send me. Until our mentality change to a servanthood mentality, greatness cannot really be achieved. And I know that in order to have a servanthood mentality, we must come to the level of humility. And humility is the only thing that can make you serve in any capacity. Always available to serve. Because when we look at greatness, it is only in service that we find greatness, not fame. I was looking at the quote from Martin Luther King Jr. and he said something like this about service. He said, everyone has the power for greatness, not for fame. He said, but greatness is because greatness is determined by service. And when I looked at the story of the Samaritan, that is exactly what it is. It became a prominent story because he served in a capacity that he was required to serve. Until service, humility, servanthood mentality becomes our lifestyle, we cannot truly achieve the greatness that we tend to chase after. the lifestyle of a servant is that they just serve. And that means we die daily. I look at the story of Jesus Christ. He gave us that example when he decided to wash the disciples' feet. And I'm sure you know the story in John chapter 13. If you read it, you read the 1 to 17, you see how Jesus was talking about how he had to wash the disciples' feet. That is a very demeaning assignment. But he did that to give us an example of what we should do in service. The service we must provide is to come with a servanthood mentality of willing and ready to serve at all times in every situation, because that is the reasonable service that the Father is looking for. The assignment of the Good Samaritan was interrupted. And you must understand, your personal agenda is going to be interrupted at any point as you keep serving the Father. Your ability to put on hold your personal agenda to serve the Father's assignment is what makes you a good and faithful servant. In order to get that name at the end of the day, when we get to heaven and we hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant," is for us to be a people that are constantly putting our own agenda aside to serve the Father's agenda. That is where greatness lies. And if it's still something that you do only when it's convenient, you are not ready to serve the Father. When I look at the story, I remember the fact that he had to put his journey aside. He had to stop by the way. He had to take the man to the inn. He had to pay the service, which means your service requires your time, your money, everything that you have. Your resources will have to be put into the service. There was an interesting picture that I had when thinking about a service. I was planning to bring it. I think it escaped my mind. There is a serving spoon. We all know the serving spoon. We all do that all the time every Sunday when we get to church. After church, we know the big serving spoon. We just put it, we use it to serve. And then we have the tablespoon. And the assignment of the tablespoon is to serve you alone. That is you, to just feed you. That is it. That's what the assignment of the tablespoon is. Is if you are in a place where it's served nicely, you have the tablespoon sitting in a nice napkin, waiting for the serving spoon to serve everyone, and then the tablespoon just nicely is used to eat. It's serving you alone. But the serving spoon, you dip it in hot stew, hot soup, everything is constantly being used to serve in every capacity. And the Father wants you to be the serving spoon. When you are only a tablespoon, you are feeding yourself and yourself alone. Because that's all it's for. Will the tablespoon complain when I take it and I decide to use it to stir something hot? It's gonna that. This is not what I'm used for. But the serving spoon is bigger. It has greater capacity and it can scoop more. It's constantly serving. It never complains. Every plate that comes its way is going to serve it. It just keeps serving. That's what the serving spoon is used for. It takes rice, you put it. It takes stew, hot or cold, you put it. Whatever you use the serving spoon for is serving, and that is the assignment. The assignment is to serve. When you choose and pick the way you serve, serve, you are like the tablespoon who just sit down. Only when rice comes, I will eat. And then you eat with the tablespoon. And it serves you alone, only you are the one to be served. The Father wants you to move from your comfort zone and serve. Anyone who is not serving, and you have not made yourself available to the Father to use or to inconvenience, if I may use that word, because the Father wants to inconvenience us. Wants to inconvenience us in every way so that we want to show that we are really serving. It's a reasonable service. The one that crucifies us, that sacrifices every of our being, and we are able to go beyond the very thing that hurts us most, and we present ourselves as that sacrifice that the Father is asking you and I to be. That is the reasonable service. You may be a priest, you may be a Levite, but the story is not told after that. But the story that is told is the parable of the Good Samaritan. The one who stepped out of their way to serve, despite the fact that it interrupted their journey. Despite the fact that they had their own agenda for the day. They have everything planned out. But each day that you think of the fact that it is you that must be served, there comes a time you need to serve others. The Father is looking for those who are willing to serve. He said that is your reasonable service. I thought I would just point it out to us, know that our service that we provide is never convenient. When we look at convenience, we will never serve the Lord. But when we serve in whatever capacity we are able to provide our service, let it be that we are ready. Just as the Father washed the disciples' feet, we must be humble enough to serve in whatever capacity that the Father has called us to serve. And until we do that, we will not call ourselves the believers that the Father wants us to be. It is the sacrifice that we provide that makes church. I was reading another quote, also by Martin Luther King Jr. He was saying that if today's church does not recapture the sacrificial spirit of the early church, he said it will lose its authenticity, forfeit the loyalty of millions, and be dismissed as an irrelevant social club with no meaning for the 20th century. Your service. If you really look back at the people, the disciples of Jesus Christ, they forsook all and followed him. Service. But it has to be convenient for us before we can do anything for the assignment that the Father called us. If it's not convenient, we shove it and we're like, it's not needed. The Father is looking for those who are willing to sacrifice and provide that reasonable service. That's all he's asking. He's not asking you for your money because he doesn't need it. But he's asking you to stand in the gap. He's asking you to pray without ceasing. He's asking you to go the side way and the byways and make sure that you compel all to come and serve the Almighty God. The Father is not asking you for anything else because you can't even give him anything. There's nothing you have that the Father did not give you. And that which he has given you, he's asking you to serve him. And sometimes that is what happens when he was in the garden of Gethsemane, and he said, can you not tarry with me for just 1 hour? It is so difficult for us to sacrifice anything because it inconveniences us. And all the Father is looking for is those who are saying, here am I, send me. He's never looking for perfect people, but he's looking for a people who are willing to give it all and say, I am here and I am available and I'm ready. Wherever you send, I'll go. In this day and age, it's difficult. That's why the Father was talking about it in Luke chapter 10, and he was talking about this. He said the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. That's why he said, pray that the Lord will bring those laborers into his harvest. It is easy to just say things, but when it comes to doing, it becomes an issue. No one wants to stand and do what the Father is calling us to do. We cannot do for an hour. We cannot do for 30 minutes. But I'm sure that if we were in a place where we are constantly persecuted, maybe that would make it more interesting for us to serve God. Maybe that would be very enticing for us because there is a reason. We know that we are willing now to give our life for it. But it's so convenient this time around on this part of the world. It's so convenient. So we can't give anything. We can't give anything. It's too much for the Father to ask. But we must remember the sacrificial spirit of the early churches is what the Father is asking us in this time and in this season. We must move from self to Christ. It must be Christ alone or nothing else. He becomes the one who is in our forefront. He becomes the center of our focus. When our focus is not on him but in every other thing, and he becomes a byproduct for us, then we are not ready to serve the Father. Service can be joyful. I don't know about you, it can be very joyful. It can be fun. It can be exciting. I always say one thing. I count it as a privilege for the Father to use me. Because he could be using 1,001 people on this earth. But if he decides and say, okay, you come and do this, the little portion that he has given me to do becomes a problem. I should count it as a privilege that I am in his will, in his agenda, and he has plucked me out of darkness into that light and say, serve me in this way. When I look at it from that angle, service becomes exciting. Service becomes fun and become enjoyable because I know I am serving the one who has called me. And the moment service becomes a chore, it's no service. Even to any human being, it's not interesting. It's not exciting. If it's something that is not palatable, it's no longer needed. We become like what the Bible talks about, being the salt of the earth. When it loses its taste, it's not fit for anything. And the Father wants us to be the salt and the light in this time and in this season. Only those who are standing can serve to the end. Service requires sacrifice, and it will inconvenience you. God bless.